Welcome, everyone. My name is Julia. I'm one of the facilitators in the Spokane Sangha for this Recovery Dharma practice. In the Spokane Sangha, we do something a little bit unique with our Recovery Dharma practice, and that is we take themes, Buddhist concepts and principles, and we study them for an entire month. And so we create meditations and practices to really get into these deeper elements of practice. And this is a way of not only exploring our relationship to habit energy, but to really begin to heal the ways that we cope with stressors in our lives. I always like to begin our practice with a sentiment of metta, of loving kindness, as a way of framing our practice. And I have this little bowl filled with these sentiments on these cards that I've made or other people have made. This one was made by one of our Sangha members, Sean C., who's here today. And Sean, this is a nice thick piece of art card paper. And he sent me a larger drawing, which I chopped up into these smaller cards. And on the back, I write, sentiments of loving kindness. This one reads, may you remember your power. May you remember your power. Friends, this is a beautiful sentiment to carry into our practice of reflection today as we think about the theme for the month of April, which is the Four Noble Reminders in Buddhism. And if you're not familiar with what these Four Noble Reminders are, very simply, the first noble reminder is you have a precious human life. The second is the nature of reality is impermanent. Everything will change. The third is karma. The happenings in your life are dependent and interdependent upon your actions and the consequences ripening. The fourth noble reminder is something called the folly of samsara, and this speaks to habit energy, the habits and the patterns that we've cultivated adaptively and maladaptively to cope with the stressors and the upending experiences of life. And why we look at this is because some of our habits are steeped in falsity. Namely, if I keep going after pleasure, I'll never experience pain. That is a foundational delusion and reality to suffering as a human being. Today and tomorrow we're going to explore, however, the first noble reminder. You have a precious human life. And one of the things about a Buddhist practice that I really love is the constant reminder that you have everything you need. You have an innate wisdom. Your inherent goodness is ever present. Your wisdom is constantly trying to get your attention. Yes, you make mistakes, you engage in misconduct. We all suffer under the habits of ignorance, aversion, anger, and so on. But we also have the capacity to gain access to insight, to learn from our mistakes, to grow and to change. And so one of the things that's really exceptional, and certainly whenever I have practiced with monastics, there's this moment to take stock of being here in the present moment, listening to the Dharma, bringing forward the Buddha as a symbol, as someone who, just like me, a human being, a person with all the struggles associated with being human. The difference is Siddhartha Gautama dedicated enormous amounts of time and energy to awaken to the conditions of his own suffering. He decided that his life was precious enough and he was worthy enough to do that work, to make that effort. And rather than keep it entirely to himself, he devoted 40 plus years of his life to teaching. And those teachings are relevant to this day. So here we are as a collective soul, a community, a sangha, exploring what he said to people who then translated it, who keep talking about it in various lineages. And here we are having yet another conversation. It's amazing that it happened, that all of the conditions of our lives ripened enough to this moment where we could be here. And this includes everything you think you did wrong, every horrible deed, every complete mistake, all the misconduct you've engaged in your life, all the things you regret, all of it. And still you're here. In a beautiful space with beautiful people, all aspiring and endeavoring to understand their conditions of suffering. I'm here to understand my habits of suffering that keep me looped and locked in. So by all of our good efforts, we are here. Amazing. And this is worth celebrating and holding with great reverence as a reminder this indeed is so very precious. Venerable Chadran up at Sravasti Abbey, whenever we've had this conversation about this first noble reminder, she often says, what do you want to do with your life? It's a precious life. What do you want to do? How do you want to treat your life? Accessing preciousness can be very challenging because the regret is thick and deep. And so in the Buddhist practice, there is a very specific way of working with regret. And it's called passaddhi. Passaddhi. And there are 4 main qualities to it. However, I have added a 5th because that's what's alive for me. When you engage in a passaddhi practice to begin to chip away at understanding one's regrets, the first thing to do is to identify having a regret. What is it? Can you label it? Can you see it? Can you understand the conditions of it? But can you do so in a way that you're not bringing out a whip or a hammer, beating yourself up, shooting yourself up with second arrows? You're simply observing, I did this. It had this consequence. I regret that engagement. No excuses, no blame, neutral observation to the best of your ability. That's the first thing. The second is regret usually implies a degree of remorse. We're sorry for what we did. And so we use that feeling, that emotion, not as permission to keep ourselves small, not as permission to keep ourselves oppressed and limited, but to use that feeling, that regret, that I'm so sorry, as energy, as power to refrain from making that error again. And so we vow. I vow to refrain from that error. Another more language that I like around the word vow is a determined decision. Vow can feel a little bit too holy for some people. I really like determined decision. I am determined to refrain from making that mistake again. The third quality, the third action, I guess, that we can take is some kind of remedial activity. This is like an enactment that is related to your determined decision. And it's not about going out there and doing community service. You can do that, but you don't have to. One of the most powerful acts of remediation in the Buddhist tradition is to sincerely take refuge in the three jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And what that means to take refuge is to not hold the Buddha at arm's length as some God that you can't reach, that's totally unobtainable, but to remember that the Buddha was just like me. He cried, he laughed, he probably puked, he probably had gas and indigestion and heartburn. I bet his armpits stunk at times when he was stressed. Just like me, he was a flesh and bone human. If he could awaken to the conditions of his suffering, then so can I. He had a level of determination that I doubt. And so I turn to his teachings, the Dharma, to inspire me, to keep me in tune and aligned with my integrity and with my practice. And I can't do it without my friends. I can't do it without a community that's going to encourage and challenge me. So we take refuge in the power of these three jewels. And they live in me, and they live in you, and they live in us. And taking refuge is an act of remediation. working with regret. The fourth is to resolve. Resolution is probably the trickiest aspect to the Pasade practice, because even when we make a vow to refrain from engaging in the habit or the action that caused so much regret, more than likely it's going to appear. It's going to take some time, and that means we're going to make mistakes. We're going to continue to make mistakes. Remember, we are not going for perfections here. We're inviting our efforts to be perfect. And so resolution is all about being willing and able to be honest with ourselves when we're fumbling around, when we're skirting the edge of a habit energy and we're about to go down a familiar pattern and we feel insecure and we're like, uh-oh, here I go again. And then we try to do something different. We make every effort to take a step away from that edge. The one that I added, the fifth R, is repeat. Because despite all of my best efforts, I sometimes fall into habit energy, and it's only after I've fallen that I realize what's happened. And it sucks so bad. I'm so frustrated. Oh, God, the inner critic that comes up and shoots me with second arrows. Julia, geez, are you kidding me? Here we are again. You know better. What's the matter with you? God. I take a deep breath. And you know what I tell myself? I sweet talk myself and I say things like, Julia, darling, yeah, here we go again. Because this is a precious life and you have a precious mind and an open heart, and we're going to keep at this again and again and again, and we're going to keep going, and we're not going to give up. And that action was regrettable, darn it. So now I've learned. I've got one more nuanced aspect to my habit energy. And I've seen it and I've experienced it and I have suffered the consequence, and I'm going to learn from it. And I'm going to refrain to the best of my ability. And I'm going to go back and take refuge. And what's been fascinating for me is the timeline of this practice. From the identification of the misconduct to the resolution is much quicker. When I was learning, and some of my negative habit energy in the form of unskillful speech would arise. Man, I spent a lot of time in the posture of self-defense, being defensive, justifying my unskillful speech. I had every right to yell at my loved one because they were being really shitty to me and they deserved it, and blah, blah, blah. And I would I would steep in sort of like a tea bag, a little bit like a grimy steeping thing. And I'd sit there and just stay in that icky, awful place, feeling completely justified. For a while, I would do that to myself. Ick, yuck, slimy, gross. And then I started practicing. And while I still have unskillful moments, I am so human. It happens. Something stirs me and I get caught and blup, I've just splattered out, spewed something unskillful, but now I see it much faster. And I know that steeping in defensive posturing, I know making excuses for myself, I know blaming my loved ones, none of that is helpful. In fact, it adds to the power of my unskillfulness. And so now I learn, oh boy, that was regrettable, that was unskillful. I immediately remind myself, let's not do that again. Let's remediate this. Let's take refuge and let's go to my loved one, Julia, and resolve this issue. Apologize. Identify what you did and make a determined decision to not do it again. And the best part about the fifth one of repeating is to just plant a little seed in the back of my head. Julia, darling, when this comes up again, you do not have permission to beat yourself up. When this comes up again in all the nuanced ways that it will, part of this practice of a precious human life is to be gentle. This is a precious error leading to a precious token of wisdom to heal and to grow. The final thing I'll say about the Pasade practice is this is deeply personal. And when it is practiced in monastic settings, it is a silent reflection. There's no need to confess to the guru or even to your wise friends. This is for you and for you alone. If you choose to share this with someone else, that is entirely your choice, but you are not required to. Working with regret is tender. So we are invited to be gentle, to go slowly, and to be very careful who we trust with our vulnerability. Identify your regrets. Make a vow or a determined decision to refrain from doing similar deeds, misdeeds. Remediate. Take refuge. Resolve. Make amends if you have to. And don't be afraid of repetition as you learn and grow. I'll end our practice today with a mantra. I have never been a mistake in the eyes of the divine. I have never been a mistake in the eyes of the divine. I'd like to end our practice today chanting, um, paying honor to the three jewels. And we chant this 3 times. And if you're familiar with it, you can join in. If you're not, it's a very simple chant. It's basically Namo, which means with a wide open heart, I bow. So we say Namo Buddha, Namo Dharma, Namo Sangha. With a wide open heart, we bow to the three jewels. It's usually done with hands together and prayer pose at the heart. If you'd rather rest your hands on your heart or keep them in a different posture, that's fine too. Whatever feels alive and true to you. Taking a moment to dedicate this practice, to dedicate this goodness far and wide. Breathing in. Breathing out. Breathing in, and then we'll chant. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sangaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sangaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sangaya. Thank you, friends. See you next time. Namaste.